You are watching QTV Experience Home. Time now for the news. The headlines. The Constitutional Court has ruled that President Edgar Lungu is eligible to stand for re-election in 2021. Vice President Enwanga says the Patriotic Front government has not made any declaration to have the 50% plus one clause removed from the Constitution. With the news in detail, my name is Machamanda. The Constitutional Court has ruled that President Edgar Lungu is eligible to stand for re-election in 2021. In its ruling, the court has determined that the term that President Lungu served after the death of President Michael Sata was not his. Delivering judgment on behalf of a bench of 7 judges, Constitutional Court President Hilda Chiwomba said, after considering the provisions of the Constitution, the court also determined that a period below 3 years which President Lungu served is not a term. Judge Chiwomba says the Constitution has not, however, clarified what happens to the period the incumbent served between January 2015 and 2016. She states that the Constitution does, however, clarify that the legislation meant that a presidential term should be 5 years and should run concurrently with a term of Parliament. And reacting to the judgment, PF Secretary General Davis Mwila says the judgment should now put a stop to all statements that President Edgar Lungu does not qualify. Our staffer Nakaonga has more in this report.
The die has been cast. The Constitutional Court has today ruled that President Edgar Lungu is eligible to contest the 2021 general elections. Earlier this year, 4 opposition political party leaders petitioned the Constitutional Court seeking a declaration that President Edgar Lungu is eligible to contest the 2021 presidential elections. The 4 are Danny Pule of the Christian Democratic Party, Wright Musona of Zambia Republican Party, Peter Chanda of New Congress Party, and Robert Mwanza from the Citizens Democratic Party. The interested parties in this matter were United Party for National Development Secretary General Stephen Katuka and the Law Association of Zambia. The court, in its judgment, which was delivered by Judge Hilda Chiwomba, who represented a bench of 7 judges, said the presidential tenure from January 25, 2015 to September 13, 2016 does not constitute a full term of office, relying on Articles 106 Sub-Article 1 and Article 106 Sub-Article 6 of the 2016 Constitution. Judge Chiwomba said after considering the provisions of the Constitution, the court also determined that a period below 3 years which President Lungu served is not a term. She said the Constitution has not, however, clarified what happens to the period the incumbent served between January 2015 and 2016, stating that the Constitution does, however, clarify that according to the legislation, a presidential term should be 5 years and should run concurrently with the 5-year term of Parliament. She also dismissed the arguments by interested parties that President Lungu is not eligible to contest as president in the 2021 elections. And speaking after the judgment, Patriotic Front Secretary General Davis Mwila said the judgment should now put a stop to all statements that President Edgar Lungu does not qualify.
First and foremost, can we have water, please? First and foremost, people have been debating whether President Edgar Lungu is eligible to stand in 2021 or not. I think the record has been put straight by the Constitutional Court. They've ruled that President Edgar Lungu is eligible to stand in 2021. I hope that the debate now will come to an end so that the Zambian people and government concentrate on building the economy of this country. So it is the victory for President Edgar Lungu, it's the victory for Patriotic Front
and the people of Zambia.
Meanwhile, lawyers representing the UPND, Keith Mwemba and Gilbert Piri, said they will not issue a statement until they read the judgment.
We can't comment.
It will be difficult to say whether or not we are disappointed, but it's not the type of verdict we were expecting. And we'll have to look and examine the reasons that they've advanced, and it will be premature to do that now.
We have to get a written judgment, read it, study it, and also as you read the judgment, you might also have to refer to the authorities they have relied on. You also go and read those authorities in full and see if there are authorities that counter that. You understand? So at this stage it will be premature to say whether we are happy or whether we are unhappy, because we have to read the judgment first.
And the petitioners had this to say.
We are grateful for the unanimous decision that the Concord has made. This settles the matter, and we are grateful that history has been made.
UPND is like that. If you cross over to them, then you become credible. When you contradict them,
you become fake, illiterate, and poor. We are not shocked by their behavior.
The courts have arbitrated over the matter, and the decision has arisen unanimously, and that has to be respected by all parties, be it the winning side or the losing side. If anything, there's no winning or losing side. What it is precedence has been shown, and that has to be respected by both parties. This is done for Zambia, for future generations, not just this generation.
Mr. Mwila, who was also accompanied by PF Deputy Secretary General Mumbi Piri and Central Province Permanent Secretary Chandakawe, among other senior party officials, took time to greet the cadres who had come in numbers to the courts. Nakawanga reporting for QTV News in Lusaka.
The Law Association of Zambia LAZ says the just concluded case on the eligibility of President Edgar Lungu to stand in 2021 is a lesson that constitution making should never be rushed. LAZ President Eddie Mwitwa says the details of the ruling by the Constitutional Court has demonstrated that constitution making is a serious process. Mr. Mwitwa says if a constitution is therefore going to be passed by Parliament, it must be a document that is going to meet the aspirations of the people and a document that will stand the test of time. In an interview by telephone, Mr. Mwitwa has told QTV News that LAZ will, however, make a comprehensive statement after critically studying the judgment of the Constitutional Court. Mr. Mwitwa says his association is also of the view that the fine-tuning of the Republican Constitution to address ambiguities of some of its provisions is necessary. He says LAZ's hope is that this will be done before the country gets to the 2021 general elections.
We need to ensure that the fine-tuning of the Constitution or reviewing the clauses that are seemingly ambiguous or inconsistent with other provisions of the Constitution, we need to get back into looking at that process. And our hope is that that can be done before we get to the 2021 general elections. The only lesson, obviously, is that constitution making is such a serious undertaking, and one that does not need to be rushed. If a constitution is going to go through Parliament, it must be a document that is going to meet the aspirations of the people and one that will stand the test of time.
And opposition UPND President Hakainde Hichilema says his party has noted the Constitutional Court's decision to give President Edgar Lungu what he has referred to as a possible third term. Mr. Hichilema has told Q News in a statement that using its collective skills, the UPND is examining this decision carefully and will inform the nation of its detailed reaction in due course. He states that for now the UPND is of the view that no one is entitled to a third term of office as President of Zambia. Mr. Hichilema says this is because when courts fail to protect citizens, the citizens have the power to map their own destiny through people power. The ruling PF has welcomed the outcome of the decision of the Constitutional Court that has cleared the path for Republican and PF President Edgar Lungu to contest the 2021 elections. Party Secretary General Davis Mwila says his party will remain humble and resist the temptation to gloat. Speaking to journalists at the party secretariat, Mr. Mwila says even though this decision comes at a time when self-proclaimed defenders of the law have over the last few months advanced an erroneous understanding that the Constitutional Court can only be impartial if it ruled against petitioners who argued in favor of President Lungu running for his second term that commences in 2021. Mr. Mwila has therefore called on those who went to court or joined the petition they should accept the outcome, stressing that this is the same court that ruled against former ministers and also recently ruled against PF members on the matter of eligibility for councillors to contest mayoral elections. He has, however, reiterated his party's stance in President Lungu's sole candidature for the party presidency in 2020 General Convention and the 2021 presidential elections. Mr. Mwila has emphasized that the Zambian people expect his administration and the party to constantly report back on the progress and setbacks they are experiencing in the manner they are governing the country. He states that the party is glad to facilitate meetings between the president and interest groups that are interested in contributing towards a better and prosperous Zambia under the leadership of President Lungu.
People have been debating whether President Lungu is eligible or not. Today the debates have come to an end because the Constitutional Court has closed all the debates. As PF, we are very much geared for 2021. The Central Committee of our party made a decision that will go with President Edgar Lungu in 2021. And I want to say that 2020, as a party, we are going to the General Conference, and I'm confident as Secretary General that President Edgar Lungu shall emerge victorious. Since the judgment has been made, I'm appealing to the opposition to accept the decision of the Constitutional Court. PF respects the judiciary, and I want to recall or remember that we lost a case in the Constitutional Court concerning the eligibility of the councillors. We lost a case in the Constitutional Court concerning the ministers who remained in office. And I would appeal again to the opposition that they should accept the outcome of this judgment. President Edgar Lungu is ready, is geared to develop this country up to 2021.
President Wina says the Patriotic Front government has not made any declaration to have the 50%+1 clause removed from the Republican Constitution. Mrs. Wina says government does not have an intention to change this constitutional provision which prescribes the presidential winning threshold. Speaking during the Vice President's question time in Parliament, Mrs. Wina clarified that if there are any media reports suggesting to the contrary, such reports are only false information. Mrs. Wina has told the House that changing or replacing of the 50%+1 is a matter that can nevertheless be discussed between herself and the leader of the opposition. She says government is however listening to what people are saying on constitutional provisions they would like to change in order that Zambia is governed in a more democratic and transparent manner. Mrs. Wina states that if people are therefore talking about moving the 50%+1 clause from the constitution, such talk has nothing to do with government or the ruling Patriotic Front. The Vice President has however acknowledged that there are certain provisions in the country's supreme law that are stifling the implementation of certain government programs. She was responding to a question by leader of the opposition, Jack Mwembu, who wanted her to assure the nation that the 2021 general elections will be held under the 50%+1 clause.
These are some of the false information we are talking about. On the social media. And for the leader of the opposition to bring such a question or an declaration to the House, I'm rather taken aback, because these are issues that we can discuss among ourselves between the leader of the opposition and even the leader of Parliament. What this government is doing is to listen to the people on which provisions in the Constitution they would like to change so that the governance of this country is done in a more democratic and open and transparent manner. So if the people are talking, it has nothing to do with the PF talking or the government talking. And this is not the only one. Maybe there may be other provisions in the Constitution that people feel so uncomfortable about. There are certain provisions, for example, that are still embedded in the Constitution that is stifling the implementation of certain programs because government is to change.
And Mrs. Wina has told the House that government is content with the 2009 teachers it recently recruited. She says this is the number of teachers that government can afford to recruit under the current financial circumstance, notwithstanding the deficit of the teachers that Zambia has. Mrs. Wina has however said government is considering to accelerate the recruitment of teachers and that next year government will hopefully increase the number of teachers it will recruit. Meanwhile, Mrs. Winner has assured farmers that sold crops to the Food Reserve Agency FRA that the Ministry of Finance has promised to settle all outstanding arrears before the end of December. She says the ministry is currently releasing 20 million kwacha on a weekly basis to the Ministry of Agriculture to pay farmers who are owed money by the FRA. Mrs. Winner was responding to questions posed by Chimbamilonga Member of Parliament Hastings Chansa and his Lufwanyama counterpart Leonard Fungulwe, respectively.
Led to the payment to farmers on the maize that was or crops that were released sold to FRA. The Minister of Finance has regularly been providing 20 million kwacha weekly to the Minister of Agriculture to take care of that problem. And we do realize that the big shortfall, but I think with this continuous recruitment of teachers on a yearly basis, and the measures that government is considering now to accelerate the recruitment of teachers, we will see an appreciation of teachers in our schools.
Minister of Health Chitalu Chilufya has allayed fears that a mysterious disease known as Kulamutwe has broken out in Kalabo district of Western Province. Kulamutwe, which is said to have been causing severe headache as the two pellets on the head softens and separate, is reported to have claimed 2 lives. But Dr. Chilufya has told Parliament during questions for oral answer that Kalabo Hospital has not recorded any case of such a disease. Dr. Chilufya has, however, revealed that the 2 deaths referred to were as a result of central nerve system accident, otherwise known as stroke, and inflammation of the brain. He says his ministry has dispatched a technical team to conduct surveillance on the reported disease in the district. The health minister was responding to a question by Kalabo Member of Parliament Chinga Miutu, who wanted to know if government is aware of the outbreak of Kulamutwe disease in his constituency.
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, not necessarily referring to measures to contain this particular disease. The government has put in place active surveillance and public health related management systems that detect, report, investigate, and respond to disease outbreaks to maintain public health security. It's for this reason that we advise and encourage members of the public in the communities to report to the nearest facility any strange cases or symptoms for prompt investigation and response so that we protect lives. Mr. Speaker, the National Public Health Institute is formed as a technical arm of the Ministry of Health to be focused on disease intelligence and surveillance in order to respond to that. So the public will be assured that there is no outbreak of mysterious disease in Kalabo.
The Media Institute of Southern Africa, MISA, has charged that statutory regulation of the media has no place in a democracy. MISA Vice Chairperson Hyde Haguta says statutory media ethics regulation arises when a law is enacted by Parliament to regulate media ethical conduct. Mr. Haguta explains that if media bodies develop a regulatory mechanism and the government takes it to Parliament for enactment, it ceases to be self-regulation of the media because it takes on the form of statutory regulation because it becomes law. He says this is dangerous and oppressive form of media regulation that will increase censorship and reduce media to mere public relations function and strip it of its watchdog role. Mr. Haguta feels that this will be contributing to the very problem stakeholders are trying to cure, unethical journalism, because under such a system media practice will be conducted only when journalists are issued a certificate. He feels that this is tantamount to licensing a fundamental right of freedom of speech even on the citizens, as the media is the channel through which the citizens speak. Mr. Haguta further states that the media will avoid any controversial story to keep itself because the law, once implemented, will be detrimental impact on media freedom, right of media to be independent, and citizens to freely engage with government and participate in decision-making processes. Government has reiterated its commitment to continue strengthening the legal framework in its quest to ensure a robust anti-corrupt framework in the country. Justice Minister Given Lubinda says this is being done by ensuring that legislation such as the Constitution of Zambia, Chapter 1 of the Laws of Zambia, is harmonized with anti-corruption laws in order to cover all public officers, including state officers, when enforcing the provisions relating to the transparency of public officers through asset declaration. Speaking at a Human Rights and Corruption in Zambia workshop organized by Transparency International Zambia ahead of the commemoration of the Anti-Corruption Day, Mr. Lubinda also hinted that government is working on a state officers bill which seeks to introduce a code of ethics for state officers. He says it is in this vein that government will ensure that allied legislation such as the Forfeiture of Proceeds of Crime Act number 19 of 2000 are strengthened, and declaration of assets provisions under the Anti-Corruption Act comply with best international practices. Mr. Lubinda has, however, assured the public that government will expedite the enactment of the Access to Information Bill so as to create an environment of accountability and transparency in workplaces and administration of public affairs.
However, this is a fight that requires the concerted efforts of everybody. And if everybody has to be on board, then we must ensure that all these negative perceptions about the intention of those who are crusaders are cleaned up. Because if we leave anything lingering in the minds of people that the crusaders against the corruption have other ulterior motives, will leave society behind. Your government, you cannot doubt at all, acknowledges that corruption is indeed a serious infringement of human rights. And in this regard, government remains committed to fighting corruption, and this commitment is borne out in the party manifesto, the PF party manifesto, and the various policies being implemented and activities being undertaken to prevent and combat the scourge. I wish to inform you that government takes this opportunity to encourage the Anti-Corruption Commission to perform the challenging task of combating corruption by ensuring that in addition to investigating corruption cases, the Commission should continue to strengthen our national government systems by collaborating with various corruption integrity committees in all line ministries and quasi-government institutions, as well as through sensitization of the public on the negative effects of corruption, particularly how it undermines development, peace, and security.
And speaking at the same event, Anti-Corruption Commission Acting Director Rosemary Nkonde has appealed to accused persons to stop bribing investigators or court officials, saying this will help reduce cases of corruption being recorded in the country.
The implement of human rights can also help corruption to flourish, depending on where you're standing. If you're an accused person or if you're the affected person. So depending on where you are, you can help corruption to flourish. So please, if you're an accused person, just let the law take its full course. Don't start bribing investigators or court officials, because at the end of the day, even though you are trying to defend yourself, you are in the long run helping corruption to flourish. Yes. So on the other hand, suspects who are being investigated or who are being prosecuted regard themselves as victims in society, and they regard ACC as an institution that is negatively, how can I put it? They regard ACC as an institution that is trying to, I'm trying to find a better word to use. Like we're trying to negatively affect their human rights. Yes, but and as a law enforcement agency, we have been called names, we've been accused, yes, of violating their human rights just because you are enforcing the law. The Anti-Corruption Commission, like I said earlier, is mandated under the Anti-Corruption Act to perform its functions. So whatever we do is drawn from an act of parliament. It's not like we just want to restrict the way people enjoy their human rights, or we just want to grab people's property. No, whatever we are doing is under pursuant to an act of parliament.
And TIZ Executive Director Wesley Chiwamba is concerned that corruption is a source of worry and needs to be addressed by all stakeholders.
As you may all be aware, on the 9th of December, the world commemorates the International Anti-Corruption Day. And the 9th of December is just a day away. It will be on Sunday. The Anti-Corruption Commission, in conjunction with Transparency International Zambia, does conduct activities that drum up to the commemoration of the International Anti-Corruption Day, more to raise awareness, more to remind us of the important role that we have to play in the fight against corruption. One of the events that we decided to do this time around as we drum up to the commemoration of the International Anti-Corruption Day was to have a meeting that specifically focuses on the relationship between corruption and how it affects the enjoyment of human rights. So we decided to partner with the Human Rights Commission, of course, while working together with the Anti-Corruption Commission to put this meeting together and discuss this very, very, very important issue. As we know, there is a direct relationship between corruption and the ability of citizens to fully appreciate and enjoy their rights.
The Road Transport and Safety Agency RATSA has called on school authorities to ensure that pupils use appropriate modes of transport as they travel to their respective destinations as schools close. Agency Head Public Relations Frederick Mubanga says school authorities must ensure that pupils do not use trucks or open vans as such kind of vehicles compromise road safety of travelers. Mr. Mubanga has observed that trucks are often used for transportation of people, contrary to the traffic rules and regulations. He explains that appropriate modes of transport such as buses should be used to avoid road traffic accidents which in the past have resulted in tragedies in which many lives have been lost. Mr. Mwanga says the agency is further cautioning all public service PSV drivers to observe appropriate speed limits to avoid any road traffic accidents during this period and beyond. He has further stated that RATSA and Zambia Police will equally be on high alert to ensure that PSV drivers do not contravene the traffic laws by overloading or overspeeding. Kembe Member of Parliament Princess Kasune Zulu has reiterated her advice to the general public on the need to undertake HIV testing. Ms. Zulu says people should realize that even when found to be HIV positive, they can still live longer and contribute to the development of the nation. Speaking when she, together with other lawmakers, took the HIV testing using a self-testing kit at Parliament, Ms. Zulu, who has lived positively for over 20 years, says it is important for people to know their HIV status. The lawmakers who include Home Affairs Minister Stephen Kampiongo, his national planning counterpart Alexander Chiteme, Cabo Central Member of Parliament Tutu Angulube, and Katua Member of Parliament Patricia Mashingwele took advantage of the various health testing points set up within Parliament building and organized by the Ministry of Health. Ms. Zulu, who has lived positively for over 20 years, says it is important for people to know their HIV status. She says this will allow 1,000 and one to understand that they should carry themselves and seek medical help for them to live longer. The Kembe lawmaker is also happy that another lawmaker in the United Kingdom has come out open about his HIV positive status, making it the only two lawmakers worldwide to break the silence concerning their HIV status. On Friday, parliamentarians, members of staff and visitors at Parliament received various health checkups provided by various health providers that had set up their stands at Parliament. The services provided include body mass index, BMI, HIV testing, as well as sugar testing, among others.
Who we are talking to, for me as a person who has lived with HIV since 1997 and now the Member of Parliament for Kembe constituency, I am so glad that the people didn't look at my HIV status, but they chose me to become the first female Member of Parliament for Kembe constituency. And I was just in the UK where I spoke at the House of Commons, and there we know that another Member of Parliament from the UK came out as living HIV positive for the last 10 years. So
Meanwhile, Home Affairs Minister Stephen Kampiongo has urged the general public to prioritize taking consistent health checkups, which he says should also include the HIV and AIDS testing. And Minister of National Development Planning Alexander Chiteme is encouraging the general public to undergo HIV testing. He says it is important that people know their status, especially with the introduction of the self-testing kit, which guarantees confidentiality. An 18-year-old female identified as Precious Kaunda of Lupili area in Samfya has been caught by a crocodile whilst she was swimming in Lake Bangweulu. Police spokesperson Esther Katongo says a search for the deceased was conducted by officers from both the police and the Department of National Parks and Wildlife, and the crocodile was spotted about 19 hours near Yachi Guest House located on the shores of the lake. She adds that an alert officer from the Department of National Parks and Wildlife managed to shoot the crocodile in the head, and the officers retrieved the body of the victim, which was found with a crushed left leg and deep cuts on the right thigh. The body has been deposited in the Samfya Hospital mortuary. The National Restoration Party NAREP has welcomed the move by the Zambia Center for Interparty Dialogue, ZCID, and the Church mother bodies to agree to work together in regards with the national dialogue. NAREP spokesperson Bwaganondo says Zambians have been waiting for the dialogue process for a very long time. He adds that it is hoped that nothing should come and jeopardize the whole process. Mr. Rondo has also commended the meeting of President Edgar Lungu and UPND leader Hakainde Hichilema, and adds that this should give confidence to the people that many issues are going to be sorted out without looking at which political party one belongs to. He further adds that everything should be dealt with and any differences should be settled out before the country goes to the 2021 general elections. He further encouraged the Patriotic Front, PF, and the UPND leaders to put any political differences aside and put the interests of the nation first.
Because at some point we had issues between ZCID and the church. Now finally the scores have been settled and the church is going to lead the process. And subsequently we saw the meeting of the two presidents, the Republican president, Mr. His Excellency Edgar Chagwa Lungu, and the UPND president. And people never expected, even us, we did not expect that these people could meet. And this is one thing that must give confidence to all of us as a people that probably we are going to sort out the many issues that we are facing as a people without looking at which political party we are coming from. Because in the past, we are so focused and most of the time putting on political spectacles each time we want to tackle the issue of dialogue. And I believe that we've gone beyond that, because we've come to realize that this issue is beyond political partisans. There are so many issues that we need to iron out, and we have so much confidence as a party that the long-awaited dialogue is soon going to be concluded, and positive strides are going to come out from that dialogue.
Civil Society Organization CSO Environment Hub National Coordinator Godfrey Piri says there is need to carry out soil testing before the use of chemical fertilizers to avoid environmental damage. Mr. Piri says that not all soil needs fertilizer, hence they need to know the type of soil that we have as a country. He adds that people are convinced that each time they plant crops, they have to add fertilizer, which is not the case. He says that chemical fertilizer will not take the country anywhere if it is used unnecessarily, because it can only damage the soil in the long run. Mr. Piri says using organic farming, people can plant crops without adding fertilizer and still get a good yield.
That's why to a larger extent, we cannot actually be on firm ground to say let's proceed with chemical fertilizer use. There is need to do soil testing. We need to know the type of soil that we have, because in most of the times, if you look at the climate smart agricultural practices that are done now, basically when you talk of agroforestry, we're talking about reducing the usage of fertilizer, not completely stopping. But then organic farming, you can do farming without fertilizer. So the scenario is, in most of the scenarios in Zambia, soil testing is not done. People are just convinced that when I plant maize, when I plant beans, I plant anything, I need to apply fertilizer. But you find that in most of the times where in small pockets where climate smart agricultural practices have been done, it has been proved that even just lining your field reduces the PHI, the acidity levels of your soil, meaning that when it brings down the acidity of the soil, it means it encourages germination and encourages growth and fertilization of whatever is put in there.
That item concludes our news, but before I take a run, here's a relook at the headlines. The Constitutional Court has ruled that President Edgar Lungu is eligible to stand for the re-election in 2021. Vice President Inwangewina says the Patriotic Front government has not made any declaration to have the 50% plus one clause removed from the Constitution. That'll do for the news. Thank you so much for listening and viewing us. Bye-bye. God bless.